Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lettered Classroom. I am so excited that you guys are here. We are back for another live chat this Sunday. Now, 2 Sundays in a row. How excited are you? So welcome back. Today we're going to be chatting all about interactive read-alouds. So I'm very curious and I want to get you guys engaging into the chat already. I want to know, do you use an interactive read-aloud in your classroom? Are you already using interactive read-alouds? Let me know in the chat. Just say yes, no, kind of. And that will just give me an idea of where we are together so that we can learn as much as possible about interactive read-alouds. So I will tell you guys that this has been a really fun journey as far as exploring with interactive read-alouds. And I'll have to be honest, some of the strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today, I was really nervous about a few years ago. I, in fact, really hated some of these strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you, but they are so good for kids. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth pretty soon. So yes, I see some of you in here saying absolutely you're already using an interactive read aloud. I'm going to challenge you guys to see exactly how you're using them inside of your classroom and how you can continue to improve on them. That's one of the big things that I think I really believe in, is that we just can't be okay with where we are. We're wanting to constantly improve ourselves so that we can grow as professionals, but we can also help grow our students. So some of you are saying, yep, I'm using them. Some of you are like, not yet. It's okay, because I'm about to give you all the information to help get you started today. And hopefully some information to help you engage your kids with some really fun and very easy strategies. So I use it a lot. Angela, that's fantastic. I'm so happy that you're using that inside of your classroom. And I'm going to kind of share with you guys as we go along and we're learning about an interactive read aloud, what exactly it is, how we can be using it inside of our classroom, what are some strategies that we're going to be able to use inside of our classroom. But I'm going to share with you exactly what I do inside of my own classroom as far as an interactive read aloud. Because I think it really varies. When we think about read alouds, we're thinking about the teacher sitting down reading the book to the class, right? And oftentimes, if you're thinking much younger grades, you're thinking like a picture book or, a short story or something, and that's totally okay. And yes, that does fall under an interactive read aloud, but I'm going to really push my upper elementary friends to really start kind of carving out some of that time to using chapter books. So now that I got you guys telling me exactly if you use it or not inside of your classroom, I want to know what you use an interactive read aloud with. Do you use it mainly with picture books, or are you using it with chapter books, or both? So picture books, chapter books, or both. Go ahead and put that down in the chat. So again, it just gives me a really good idea of where I should go with the conversation and how I can help serve you the best. So picture books, chapter books, or both. For those of you who are joining in, or you're like in this random YouTube world and you're like, who is this very lovely, pretty lady? That's my husband in the background. By the way, guys, it's my husband's birthday. So can we please just wish him a very happy birthday in the chat? I am still doing, he's rolling his eyes at me. I am still doing a live because we are committed to you. Both of us are committed to you. But it is his birthday. I'm not going to tell you how old he is, but he's getting up there. he's got the gray hairs to prove it. So if you are new and you're like, who is this person? My name is Bridget Spackman. I'm a multi-age teacher in Central Pennsylvania. I teach currently 5th grade only because of #COVID, but hopefully I'll be able to go back to teaching 4th, 5th, and 6th grade next year. I've been doing that now for 4 years. Holy moly, time just goes so fast. I have a passion for literacy instruction, and in fact, I've worked really hard to develop a method called Bridging Literacy that really decreases the amount of instructional time, but increases the engagement and the level of understanding when it comes to your kids in literacy. So very excited about, look at all those birthday wishes. So thank you so much for joining in, guys. All right, so I see that we use it with picture books. We're using it with both. I've used it with both, mainly chapter books. And so here's how I'm going to kind of set it up. The first thing that we're going to do is just chat a little bit about what is an interactive read aloud. And so I went on Google. Yes, I did. I went on Google and I Googled what exactly is the true definition of an interactive read aloud. And I'm going to read this to you word for word. Okay. So here's what it says. It says it is a read aloud in literacy where it's an event whereby children actively engage in listening and talking about the text throughout the duration of the read aloud. So again, it's when children actively engage. All right, so this is the biggest piece about an interactive read aloud, right? They're active, they're engaging with the conversation, they're engaging with the text as we're going about and reading. So a lot of the times, I think the biggest thing, Luke says I just turned 21 on Friday. Happy birthday, Luke. So they are engaging with this text. And this is the biggest piece of it, is that students are not just passive listeners, right? They're not just sitting in a circle or at their desk just listening to the story. You're prompting them to really think about particular parts of the story. You're prompting them to have a conversation about that. And I think one of the biggest strategies that we've seen in education is the simple turn and talk, right? It's an oldie but a goodie. And I think it's still a great goodie that we can continue using about just getting kids to learn to listen and have conversations with one another. But another thing that's really important with that whole turning and talking is that we're also giving kids the opportunity to disagree politely and to have some of those conversations where we're not always seeing eye to eye, because we shouldn't see eye to eye. We should be able to listen to each other's opinions and perspectives and then also give feedback and also connect our own opinions and perspectives into a conversation. So that is a definition of an interactive read aloud. Actively participating. They're actively engaged throughout the duration of that read aloud in general. So then we're going to go into, so we understand what it is. So what's the purpose? Why do we use it in education? What is the whole reason it came about? Well, if you think of Fontes and Pinnell, which I was always a big Fontes and Pinnell lover. I loved Fontes and Pinnell when I was in kindergarten. We used it through and through. Like I was diehard Fontes and Pinnell. And then I came to 4th grade in Pennsylvania, and now we use DRAs. I don't love DRAs very much. So what is the purpose? And here's what Fontes and Pinnell, greatest people ever, have said. It is the foundation for instruction in your classroom. It provides rich opportunities, love that, rich opportunities for every student to expand background knowledge, experience age-appropriate and grade-appropriate text, and learn a variety of ways to think deeply and use academic language to talk about and engage in a text. I love so many different things about that. Okay, so the first thing that I want to say that I love is that they say to it's rich opportunities, and I think that's great. Let's just be honest, not all of our kids are going to totally love, they're all not going to all read the same text. I have one little kiddo in my classroom right now, for the love cannot get him off of Dogman. He loves Dogman. He loves Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So my read aloud time is to help him expand with those rich opportunities and a variety of text. They also said to experience age appropriate, and I think that goes back to that whole Dogman, which I do love Dogman, don't get me wrong, but I think as a 5th grader, we truly do need to start expanding our reading, but also grade appropriate text. And then to learn a variety of ways to think deeply. Oh, I love that. We need to show kids how we think deeply about texts, and an interactive read aloud is going to do just that. So I feel like I'm jumping ahead of myself just a little bit, so I'm going to kind of reel it back just a tiny bit. So how is this different just from a normal read aloud, right? So a normal read aloud, I would say, and here's kind of I'm throwing in my little opinion, my little 2 cents into this. A read aloud where you're just kind of just read, and you're just reading the book with the kids, and you don't necessarily have them talk all the time, but maybe every once in a blue moon, you might have them turn and talk with each other. I'm not going to say that that's an interactive read aloud, because if it's not consistent, if it's not purposeful, then it's not going to be an interactive read aloud. There has to be that consistency that has to define a purpose for that reading, versus you just saying, hey, we're going to read this book together, and then as we read, if I find something that's really cool and really important, I'm going to have you guys turn and talk about it. Not so much interactive. They're not truly engaged. The kids don't really know when they're going to need to be engaged. With an interactive read aloud, I think it's the consistency over the span of the book that causes them to engage in that text. So that is my opinion as far as the difference between a read aloud and an interactive read aloud. Okay, so we're going to get into some benefits. Okay, so we know what it is. Now let's get into some benefits. Here's why we use them inside of our classrooms, other than what Fontes and Pinnell have told us. The first thing that it does is it helps to build community, classroom community, through a shared text. And I truly believe that when we sit down and we read a text together, it really brings kids who don't typically see eye to eye, or maybe they don't have the same likes, that they're able to have a conversation about this book because they're both listening to it, they're both engaging with it. It's something that really kind of brings that community and pulls all the kids together so that they all collectively will have this desire to know what's kind of happening in the book. It really, I truly do think that it builds that community piece. The next thing is that it provides an opportunity for all. I'm going to capitalize all. all students to access grade level content. And this is going to be really important because I know if you are just like me and I have a classroom from kids who are probably on a second grade level to a sixth grade reading level, that you have a variety of students in your class. Whether you have gifted, you have EL, you have learning support, which that's my world at the moment. I have a little bit of everything. That you really want to make sure that you're providing an opportunity for all students to have the ability to experience grade level content and grade level appropriate books, right? We want them to experience those types of texts. And so an interactive read aloud does just that. It opens them to that world of, oh, so this is what everybody else is kind of talking about. I may not really be able to do it independently, but who's to say that I'm not able to listen and also engage in a conversation with my peers? Because kids learn more when they're together and they're having conversations together than they do from us. I don't know why. Maybe they just think that we're not as great of trying to give information. They are all about talking with one another and sharing ideas, and they do a great job with that. So the next reason, the next benefit that we have as interactive read alouds is to expose students to complex texts. And this is going to be one that I think is really important. So here again is me throwing in my 2 cents. You guys can agree or disagree. It's totally out there. I'm throwing this out there. So when I wrote my bridging literacy, my units, my curriculum, a lot of my bridging literacy curriculum has like a variety of either picture books, short stories, anthologies, poetry, but it is shorter texts that I'm using to be able to begin students and get them learning how to apply different strategies to learn skills, right? And so the reason why I choose those smaller texts is because I can be done pretty quickly and I can move on to another book. It exposes them to a variety of books, a variety of genres, and a variety of types of texts, right? We want to expand them and not just always use picture books or not just always use short stories. We want them to learn how to use poetry, articles, website information. We want them to be exposed so that when they go to take that strategy and apply it to that variety of text, they know how to do that. They're not just like, well, wait a second, this isn't a picture book. What am I supposed to do? You've given them that opportunity because you're constantly giving them a lot of, a ton of variety of text. That's why I've done that. So for me, when it comes to my read aloud time, which guys, this is separate, okay? There are text in here that yes, I read aloud, and yes, it is considered an interactive read aloud. But when I have my separate read aloud time, which I've carved out a good 20 minutes for that time in my day, where I sit with a chapter book with my students and we read together. But I want to expose them to chapter books all year long. Doesn't mean I'm never going to have them give them the opportunity to use a chapter book in my class. It simply means that I'm going to scaffold that process for you so that as we're working to build our skills, learn our strategies, we're doing that with smaller text that we can handle, right? Bite-sized pieces, so that when we get to the big chapter books at the end of the year, because every year at the end of the year, I do book clubs. I do book clubs because they're fun, they're engaging, it's collaborative, the students get excited about it. So I'm able to do about 1 to 2 book clubs every single year, depending on how crazy the year is. So I want to expose them to those chapter books very early on. And so my read aloud time, which is also an interactive read aloud, I want to ensure that I'm using those chapter books and that I'm modeling for them how I take the strategies and skills that we're learning in our ELA block and pulling it into this chapter book. So I'm exposing them to it as much as possible so that when we get to that end point, they really have a nice solid foundation of a lot of those strategies and skills, not all of them maybe, but a lot of them. They're able to then apply it across a larger and longer text. Does that make sense? Okay, so I think it's incredibly important that we're using some of these longer texts with our students so that they can already start to have conversations and track their thinking and apply those skills. Finally, I'm modeling, and this is the big benefit, is I'm modeling those reading skills that we've been learning. We're making connections to how all of these skills work together, because that's the thing with reading, is that every skill, every standard that we're learning, they all connect in some way. If we're learning about plot, well, that connects to characters because we understand that the character is going to go up and down with the plot. If we're understanding about characters, we know that we have to pay attention to the setting because the setting is going to affect the mood and the tone. And then it also might affect how the characters react to particular events, right? So everything starts to really connect. And that's why I have this really nice scaffolded approach when it comes to how I teach my standards and my learning targets in upper elementary. But what I'm trying to do during my interactive read aloud is I'm trying to get the kids to see all of the connections between everything we've been learning. So we're pulling in characters, we're talking about setting, we're pulling in plot, we're talking about conflict. We're going into mood and tone. We're talking about figurative language. We're talking about the writer's craft because all of those things come together to help us develop a deeper understanding of the entire book. Make sense? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you feel good so far. Or if you have questions, I'm going to take a sip of my soda real quick. Okay. So here's what we've talked about. We've talked about what it is. We've talked about the purpose. We've talked about the benefits. But now you're probably thinking, yeah, so like how do you go about picking your interactive read aloud? What's kind of going on in this whole process? So here's what I do. The first thing that I will typically do is I like to look across multiple genres. I'm really big into genres. If you want to do this with theme, if you want to focus more on the theme aspect, you can completely do that. So you have a variety of ways that you can start to pull ideas in text. What's really interesting is I have not had, except for one book, for the last 5 years, I have never repeated a book, minus one book. In the 5 years that I've been teaching for my interactive read alouds because I've been trying to open myself to new texts. And plus, I think it's fun. I think now I'm going to start to kind of take some of my favorites and be more intentional with those pieces. So the first thing that you want to do is choose your text for your interactive read aloud. Now, I'm going to go off of my read aloud time. So again, this is different from when I'm doing this. So for my reading block, I will read chapter books, short stories, anthologies, poetry, and I will do these same strategies that I'm talking about this piece here today in those. However, I'm going to only focus on my read aloud time. Okay, so I want you to think the 20 minutes at the end of the day, right before my special. We're pretty much done with all our content. Now the kids are just kind of at their desks because that's what we're doing this year. And I'm opening up my chapter book. All right, so I've set the stage for you. I'm opening up my chapter book. I've got my microphone on. I'm usually like seated by this bulletin board that I have off on the side of my classroom, and I'm just sitting right on top of the shelf. Got my chapter book. Everybody can hear me. Eyes are all on me, and we're ready to go into our read aloud. So that's my scene. So I choose my text. Now, you can base this off of genres, which is my favorite. I typically like to pick a few of the different genres. I will pick a historical fiction every year. I will pick a fantasy every year. I will pick a realistic fiction, which I normally start the year with a realistic fiction because it's just a little bit easier to get the kids talking and chatting about the character themselves, because I know that's where I'm going to be going first, is talking about characters. And then I will, once I've picked out my books, like I have just kind of a selection of those texts, you can read through them. So read through the book, the entire book. I know. That's the hardest part. I will tell you guys, and I don't have an example of this today. But I was talking with Michelle, Pike-Fuller Primary, and we were recording some podcasts this morning, and I told her, I'm going to do my interactive read aloud video today. And she was like, oh, are you going to talk about your teacher copy chapter books that you would do? And I said, no, I should have brought one of those. I have all my teacher copies. So what I do is I will have, these are typically for book clubs. So imagine like this is like one of my book club books. And then I just have like a big sticker that says teacher copy on the front of the cover. And inside of the book, I will highlight, I will underline, I will write notes to myself. I will write all over the book because it's just so much easier for me to open up the chapter, look at the chapter, figure out exactly where I'm at, and say, oh, guys, I want you to look at page 7 here, second paragraph, and here's the question that I have. I don't have it on some other random piece of paper. It just tends to get a little frustrating. I will tell you, for my normal read alouds, I don't always have a teacher copy because those books tend to get a little pricey, and some of them, I just don't have that. But, so here's what I would say. Read through the text. Whether it's the short story, whether it is the poem that you're going to be reading with your kids, or a chapter book, you don't have to do maybe the entire text. If you're doing a big chapter book, maybe the first 2 or 3, 4 chapters, just reading ahead a little bit at a time. This is really good for when you have bad words. Let's just be honest, Scar Island had some bad words in it, so you gotta just be careful. Read ahead. Or if you just don't want to have the whole total shock thing with Wolf Hollow, I will tell you really bad things happen in Wolf Hollow. It's really sad. But then that way you're not like, oh my gosh, should I be reading this out loud? It helps you with that whole shock factor when you're trying to read in front of kids. So for chapter books, read about 2, 3, 4 chapters ahead of time. And when you read through it the first time, I want you to read through it just for the purpose of understanding the text. And then I want you to go back and I want you to look for specific things. You're going to look for vocabulary. What are the big vocabulary words that you're going to be pulling out? You can try and do this during your first read. I will be honest, I am not very good at that. I have to read with specific intention every single time. So I read it one time and then I will open it again and I will reread it again. But find vocabulary word, figurative language that you see that's going on in there, and make a note of that. So that way when you get to that point, you can be intentional as a teacher and say, I want you to be listening for this one sentence that I'm about to read. Okay, listen to the sentence and then I want you to think about what is the author trying to tell you as a reader. And so then you read that sentence, they're thinking about it, and then you can give them the opportunity to turn and talk at that moment. So read through the text, then identify either vocabulary, figurative language, and then I want you to start thinking about discussion points. So I was really, really struggling because I am reading this one book, guys. It's called Echo Mountain. Have you heard of it? Let me know if you've heard of it. So Echo Mountain, same author as Wolf Hollow, because I loved Wolf Hollow. And I love Echo Mountain. I do love it. But let me tell you, if you start to read Echo Mountain aloud, it took us a few days to like really get into it. The exposition, it takes forever. They are constantly setting it up. And so the kids and I are having this entire discussion of, oh, is this the inciting incident or is this the problem? Like, when's the problem gonna come about? We're finally in it. Guys, I'm gonna tell you, there's like a hag in the mountain. She's got like maggots eating at her leg. The kids and I'm trying to not vomit as I'm reading this page to these poor kids, which is why we read a day or two ahead of time. Okay. So, read the text, look for discussion points, point out things such as characters, point out things such as setting that you really want to listen to. If you have a specific paragraph where you really just think, man, the author did a great job with their craft here. If you're hearing repetitive phrases or repetitive words, those are a really good opportunity. Echo Mountain has those repetitive phrases that come about over and over and over again. So the kids and I just have a really good conversation about, well, why does the author do this? What is the author trying to tell us? And so we're just brainstorming all of these different ideas and tracking them as we go along in this book. And so that's kind of it. That's the process of it. That's really what I do. I read ahead. I look for vocabulary, figurative language, and any sort of discussion points that I feel as though are going to be really good to helping the kids understand what's happening in the text. All meanwhile, while I'm making sure to pull out that academic language, I really force my kids to use that. When we're talking about inferring, when I'm talking about predicting, the kids are using those terms. When we're talking about character traits, they're all using that language because I want them to get used to that piece. Okay, so those are our focus areas. And I want you to understand that there's really three big ways that we go about thinking and talking about this text as we are reading aloud with our kids. The first one is we're thinking within the text. And basically what this means is we're looking at, trying to solve words, which if you're in upper elementary, I'm going to be honest, I don't do a ton of this. We're thinking of it as far as meaning of vocabulary words. We're looking at context clues within the text to help us understand those vocabulary words, but we're not trying to track and make sure that we're reading it correctly. I spend more time in the other two ways. So the first one is thinking within the text. I spend more time in thinking beyond the text and thinking about the text. So when we're thinking beyond the text, we're making predictions. We're making connections to self, to the world, to other texts that we've been reading. We're inferring and we're synthesizing. So we're processing the information that's happening to help us develop a new understanding, new meaning of what's happening within that text. When we think about the text, we're analyzing, we're examining the elements of just the text in general, and we're kind of pulling it all together to help us understand that piece. And we're critiquing. We're trying to look at the author's craft and determine, well, why does the author do this? What's our own kind of personal knowledge that we have that can help us in understanding this and helping us to develop new ideas? So those are kind of the three main ways. Again, I spend more time with thinking beyond and thinking about the text than what I do with thinking within that text. So the last thing that I'm going to be talking about, and this is going to be the fun part, okay? So I have 5 different strategies that I'm going to be sharing with you guys for your interactive read alouds. Now, the most basic of all forms, and this is not one of my 5, so don't get too sad. The basic of all forms when it comes to interactive read alouds is your turning and talk, right? That's going to be the basic of all forms of interactive read alouds, getting kids talking about the text with each other and then sharing it out loud. So that's the basic one. Let's get into some of the fun ones, okay? So here's one of my favorites. I will tell you, let me start actually with this one. The first one that I'm going to start with is book tweets. Have you guys heard of book tweets? I'm sure you have. Like, it has to be a really popular thing. I think I heard about them a couple of years ago. I only started recently using book tweets because somebody else had mentioned to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that, and I should probably start using them. So here's what I do is I have this basic little piece of paper, and then I just cut these little pieces out. I don't like to give them a whole piece of paper. I like to just give them one, okay? Just one. And what I do is I just tell the kids, hey, as I'm reading, I want you to write down a book tweet that you have. So here's my really sad, it's not very good, so don't judge me, all right? Book tweet example. So here's my little book tweet example. It's super, super bright. So I wrote Wolf Hollow. I drew a little picture. My wolf is not too cute. I'm really sorry. And then I put SPAC 25 because we're not very creative as my class apparently when it comes to our Twitter handle. SPAC 25. They wanted to write SPAC Attack and it was just too long. So we went with SPAC 25. 25 is our room number. And then here it just says, Betty is beginning to show her true colors. So in Wolf Hollow, Betty is the antagonist. And she is just nasty. So there is moments in there when she just, you know, is finally starting to come out as the big bad in the book. So that would be our book tweet. And then I would collect the book tweets and I would put them up maybe out in the hallway. So as the kids are kind of lining up, they're coming into the classroom, they're able to read each other's book tweets. So it's something that just kind of is ever cycling and we just keep rolling them in and out. So book tweet is very, very simple, but still really fun. If you wanted to, you could just put it on a sticky note. It doesn't need to be this fancy if you don't want to go all through this. Sometimes I don't even do this. So that's my first one, are your book tweets. What's really fun, and I haven't done it this year just because of the lack of movement. Sometimes I would rather have my kids like move things around. What would be really fun is if you had one of these and for each one, you can have lines connecting these and moving down as if kids are responding to them. So if you have one book tweet, have some kids respond to that book tweet so that there's like this constant cycle of, okay, what did we say and how are we continuing that conversation there? So that's one example, one strategy, very simple. The next one is going to be some that I really, really love using. And I'm going to give you guys two different options, especially if you are not like a 5th or 6th grade teacher. I think it's important to have this as an option. So the first one are going to be the harder of the two. So these are called notice and notes. These are your signposts. So it's from the book Notice and Note, which I actually have down here. And your signposts are essentially times when you're reading in the book and it wants you to really focus on something. So let me give you an example. A memory moment can be when, oops, sorry, I've got all my papers everywhere. Did you just open your Diet Coke?
I was waiting for a break.
Oh. All right. So a memory moment might be that when you're reading, you notice that the character has a flashback. They're remembering something. So what the kids would end up doing is you could give them a set of these. You can also make smaller ones. But as these start to see a memory moment, they might hold up their signposts. So when you see them hold up the signpost, you stop to have that conversation with them. Let's say that there are words of the wiser. So maybe the guide in the story is talking to your protagonist and they're like, listen, here, let me share some wisdom. And as they're dropping that wisdom, your students are going to hear it and they're going to hold up their signposts. Now, here is my suggestion with signposts, because they are very challenging. I am not going to say that signposts are great for 4th grade. I'm just not. My recommendation would be that you pick maybe 1 or 2 of them for 4th grade. If you are in a 4-6 building or maybe like a 3-5 building, you might come together as an entire school and say, listen, we know that this is really hard for our kids, okay? And so maybe there is the memory moment could be something that we do only in 4th grade. So we have memory moment or we have the aha moment. Okay, this is only going to be for fourth graders. So get your fourth graders really used to these 2 signposts. And maybe even during specific times, if you read ahead those, 3 chapters that day and you say, oh man, there's a lot of aha moments. And you say, okay, I know that there's going to be a ton of these that's happening within this part of the text. I'm going to hand out only the aha moment. And so you set the attention right before you start to read. And you say, hey guys, I'm handing you an aha moment. Let's talk about what that is. Have the kids share, make sure they have a very clear understanding of the signpost. And then afterwards, as you're reading, they're constantly holding this up as they start to hear those aha moments. And all it does is it just adds that other element of them listening for a purpose. They're setting that purpose at the very beginning, and you're allowing them to kind of hold those signs up. So another one is the contrast, maybe in contradictions. Okay. This one is like, well, it's something when the character is doing something out of that's not normal for them. All right. And so I would probably say that this is maybe a 6th grade type of signpost. Either way, you can get together with your team, because signposts are not easy, and say, hey, let's go ahead and establish that we set these up for 4th grade, and then in 5th grade we can add the again and again, and then we can add the tough question, and then finally in 6th grade, or whatever other grade it is, I think I've gotten off on my grades, you can add 2 more. So as a school, you're setting that to help get them and encourage them to learn these signposts, so that by the time they get ready for middle school, they're really prepared and are able to use those signposts correctly. Now, if you're like, Bridget, I don't like signposts, they're way too difficult, I completely understand. So here's an alternative. This one is going to be from the book Disrupting Thinking. If you've read that book, it's actually pretty good. So Disrupting Thinking, and it's called, the instructional strategy is called Book, Head, Heart. So the idea is that you are reading with 3 different focuses. You read with the understanding the book, you read with your head, so you're thinking something, and then with your heart is when you're feeling something. So these are little bitty posts, which are the same thing, except these are on popsicle sticks. They're a lot smaller. And you would introduce these as you go around. So the first one could be the exclamation point, and this is to symbolize like really important information. So as students are thinking and they're listening to the story, they might hold that exclamation point up, and you might say, okay, John, can you tell me why you held up that exclamation point? What exactly did you find to be like a really important moment in this story? And it's really nice because the kids are holding up the item that's kind of they're focusing on. And I wouldn't give them all of these every single time, but you can kind of encourage them to use maybe 1, 2, or 3 of them as you are going through the text. So Disrupting Thinking, I'm sure you can go out there and look at it. If you want to take a screenshot, here's your opportunity to take a screenshot. Here's what they say. So it is important that, I just learned, it is confusing that, I was confused when, it is funny that, something surprised me, I wonder, I predict, a favorite thing, something I like, and then I feel. So those are the book, head, and heart just strategies that students can be using as they're reading and they're trying to be actively engaged with that text. Okay? So how many have I done? 2? I've only done 2, because we're going to count the signpost and the BHH, which is the book, head, heart, as 1. Okay, that's 1. So here's another strategy that you can use. This one is called Everyone Read 2. And again, it's very similar to the signpost, minus this one is written, where these are just like visual cues where we're just having conversations about. This one is to get them to focus on a very specific question. So what you will do, and this is very simple, you would just have a read to find, figure out, and then we found and figured out section. And so you would hand these out at the very beginning of your read aloud time. And you would say, okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to read with intention. Every time we open the book to read, we are trying to answer something from the previous time. So maybe, for instance, in Wolf Hollow, you are introduced to the character Toby, and you're trying to figure out why Toby wanders and why he doesn't stay in one spot. And because you read that 2 chapters ahead of the time, you know that this chapter they're going to discover why Toby wanders constantly. And so what you're going to do is give them that. You're going to tell them to write this wonder, that question, the thing that they're about to figure out at the very top. And so as you're reading, they're going to go ahead and start writing these down at the bottom of we found, we figured this out, and we're going to put all of that information there. So Lola asked, is this a resource in BL? So here's the thing. I procrastinated a tiny bit, and I'm kicking myself for procrastinating. So I will have all of this up as a resource. If you can follow me over on Instagram, I will post probably tomorrow. Do not quote me because I'm really bad at sticking to things. But if you want to follow me on Instagram, I will post tomorrow that I have all of these things as a free resource, from the signposts to the BHH items to the everyone reads to, and also have the book tweets.
Is it free to everybody or
free to everyone?
Is it going to be in the store, or where is it going to be?
I'm going to have it to where it's going to be a link where they have to just put their email in.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's it. Because I can't keep putting things in the store for free. I'm getting to my limit to how many things I can put up in my store. Because I don't want to go above the 100. I gotta stay below it. So I'm gonna have it up to where you guys can just put your email in, and then it'll automatically send you the resource, so that way you have all of these items for free. Okay, so follow me over on theletteredclassroom.com, or just the Lettered Classroom for Instagram, and you'll see when I post for all these resources. Okay, so everyone reads to is simply just giving them the focus. Again, going back to Toby. So let's say you know for a fact that they're going to find out why Toby is constantly wandering. So what you do is you go ahead and you give them this sheet, and then as they sit down, they're going to answer that question. So then you collect it and you have a conversation. You can use this as a quick assessment. Are they able to locate that information? Maybe even you copy that chapter and you give it to the kids, and then they all kind of follow along and read that with you. So that way they're pulling that information directly from the text to help support their thinking for how they figured that out, right? So that's going to be another strategy. I really, really like this one. It doesn't have to be this card. It can be an index card. It can be a sticky note. I use those a lot. Okay? So Heather says, would a first chapter Friday be considered an interactive read aloud? While students are listening to the chapter, they are filling out a graphic organizer. Yeah, I think so. The only thing is that with a first chapter Friday, you're constantly changing books. And the only thing with that is that they're not kind of looking at the entire text, and they're not continuing to pull the strategies and skills to be able to see the entire plot line. Because in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, we really need to get them used to having conversations about plot and about character, and looking for the character change, looking at how we end those stories. And so with first chapter Friday, if I just remember correctly, like it's just that one chapter and then you move on to the next book. It's meant for an exposure. I think that's fine. But I would still try and find some way to get from a start to finish with the text, and pull these strategies and engage students in conversations. And here's the thing, again, I'm jumping ahead of myself. You don't need to do this every day. If you want to just do a turn and talk, that's fine. Do turn and talk that day. If you want to be a little bit more engaged, be more engaged that day. If you constantly have them use these every single day, the novelty of it is not as exciting anymore. I think this is fun for kids to be able to hold their little signposts up. But you can just use it when you know you're going to need it. That's going to be the biggest part about reading about 2 or 3 chapters ahead of the students when you're doing your read aloud, so that way you're able to plan and figure out exactly what you're going to focus on. And you don't want to do everything, right? You don't want to do vocabulary every time and figurative language every time and have one of these strategies every time. You are never going to get through the book if you do that. I think you pick one, at the most 2. So if you pick a signpost, great. You can throw in a vocabulary word to have students turn and talk about. But if you're going to do a vocabulary word where you have kids really dissect it, I wouldn't do, much else other than just turning and talking that day. So pull in turning and talking, add some of these elements every once in a while, but you don't have to do it every single day. You're never going to get through the text, and I think you're really going to start to lose students if you don't constantly try to get ahead of the book, so that way that they're staying happy and engaged with that text. Okay, so I talked to you guys about the Everyone Read 2. The next one is going to be one that I haven't done a ton of, but I have a lot of art students this year, a lot of kiddos who love to draw, and I'm sure that this is like right up their alley. And this one is called Summarizing with Images, and this is from Sarah Valo's Reading Strategies book. So summarizing with images, what they're basically doing is you can give them an index card. I like to give them the really big index cards. Give them the index card, read the chapters, but as you're reading, what they're doing is they're drawing particular parts of the story. So let's say we're reading Wolf Hollow. And in Wolf Hollow, we're reading about Toby. We're reading about that cabin in the woods. We're reading then about the rock. I have no idea if all of these are actually like together, but let's say we read about all of those pieces. So they might draw the woods with the cabin. They might see a girl. They might have Toby drawn. They might see a rock that they draw there. But then the whole purpose is to then take those sketches, those drawings, and then have them retell what was happening in that text. What did they read about? So they're basically taking their pictures, they're pointing at their pictures, and they're retelling the events of those several chapters. So it's really easy, really fun. Like I said, I would just do it on an index card and then let the students take them home. You can post them up for a few days. It's just kind of up to you on how you choose to go about that. Now, the 4th one, because I know I'm taking forever. It's already 7:47. Holy moly, guys, I talk a lot. The next one I have for you is going to be the very basics, and this is probably the one that I use the most, and that's interactive journals. Now, I don't necessarily have a physical journal. We use Schoology. I have a folder that's titled Read Alouds. The Read Alouds folder then has all of the various read alouds that we've done as far as our chapter books. And then I have various discussion posts. I have different quizzes that are in there, and it's just something for the kids to be able to engage and have conversations using the LMS feature there. And that's basically all it is I have a focus, a question, something for them to do, and it's for them to respond and have conversations about text. I love discussion boards with my students because it gets them practicing how to respond to others. So I will say, hey, I want you to respond to the question, and then I want you to find 2 other people and respond to their posts. So I want you to comment on their post. And so you're kind of getting the kids used to developing a conversation and how to go back and not just say, hey, good job. It's not just good job. I want you to like pull more information out. If they're talking about Toby, can you add something else to talk about Toby and to share some of your thinking? And so that's something really good to practice, because let's be honest, they're going to do that a lot when they get into college. Do you know what I mean? The final thing, and this is where I'm going to ask my wonderful happy birthday husband over here, my birthday boy, to put up a picture. So the final thing that I'm going to do is plug my my read aloud tracker. And so this is just something that I have created. It is up in my store if you guys want to look at it. But I have this bulletin board in my classroom. And so what I do is each of these little shapes basically represents something. We keep track of the characters down there. We have the setting. And so as we're having conversations, I'm filling out my bulletin board section. We add sticky notes for the types of conflict that we're identifying, because let's just be honest, there's not just one type of conflict when it comes to a chapter book. There's multiple conflicts that's happening. There's an internal, there might be a society conflict, you might have, a conflict with another character, but there's little bitty conflicts because plot just doesn't go up. It goes up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, all the while still going at that big slope, right? So I'm filling out my read aloud tracker here, but my students also have a Jamboard companion. And so my students will pull up their Jamboard and then they're filling out their tracker while I fill out mine. At the end of the text, they will submit that with me with their reflection and their thoughts on the book. So basically they give it a rating and they submit that to me, and I kind of take that as a data point for their understanding of plot and being able to apply that to a larger text over a longer period of time. So that's my read aloud tracker, and that is the final strategy that I have for you guys. So let's just kind of review these really quick. So the first strategy that we talked about are going to be book tweets that you can just hand out to your class and allow them to respond to one another's tweets that you can post up on a bulletin board. Another one is going to be the summarizing images, which is the kids will draw pictures, but then they point and retell the events of the story throughout. The everyone read to, so you're identifying a specific thing that you're trying to figure out, and then you're finding that information and sharing it on a little card. You have your interactive journals that can either be through your LMS or through a physical journal paper. You also have your signposts, so you can either do signpost here or BHH, which again is from Disrupting Thinking. That's that book. And then finally, I'm looking to see which my last one was. I think that was it. Oh yeah, my Jamboard. That was it. So those are the 5 strategies. I will say interactive read alouds. I think they're really important to get your kids to really get engaged and get excited about these. Start trying to pull in some of these strategies. Again, I wouldn't try to have one every single week, especially if you're just starting to implement something other than just your typical turning and talking or your discussion, your exit ticket discussion question, whatever it is. You can do maybe once a week. Have something like this, ease yourself into it, get yourself used to it, or else if you end up saying, hey, I'm going to do one every single day this week, you're going to get burnt out. I promise you, you will. And then you're not going to want to do them anymore. So slowly but surely start to kind of ease yourself into finding some of the strategies that you want to start implementing into your own interactive read alouds. Any questions?
Pictures of the journals? Is that possible?
Do you have any pictures of these interactive journals? I don't do the physical journals. I do everything in my LMS. So I just have discussion questions up in my Schoology. That's what I use. So I guess an equivalent would be like a Google Classroom, or I don't know the other ones, like a Blackboard or something. So we use Schoology in my district, and I have them post everything in Schoology. So I don't do physical journals. I'll be honest, I hate physical journals. I just do. I'm not a good manager of it. It's not something that fits with my personality as a teacher. And so I stick with just doing everything digitally when it comes to responding to the text.
Do you want to get into, Jacob asked about Zoom calls. Do you want to get into what you might be doing over the summer?
Zoom calls?
Well, with BLC members.
Oh, okay. So I was thinking over the summer, here's my thoughts. And I'll be curious to get your feedback as well. So this would be a really good opportunity to just talk with you guys and get your thoughts. So one of the biggest things that I've kind of seen in my journey of curriculum writing and developing bridging literacy and talking with so many educators from all over, and the hardest part is really understanding what in the world is it that I'm supposed to be teaching? What does this standard mean? How does this look when it comes to the instruction that I'm providing my kids? So what I plan on doing over the summer is that I will have anchor standards that I'm going to focus on. So we'll have literature anchor standards and informational anchor standards. They're going to be separate, even though they're pretty somewhat similar in a way. And what we're going to do is I will have a day where I am on Zoom, and we will go through an anchor standard, just one. But we're going to look at it from a 4-6 lens, meaning when we talk about that anchor standard, we're going to look at it as a 4th, 5th, and a 6th grade teacher. And here's why we do that, because if I'm a 4th grade teacher, I need to know where my students are coming in from 3rd grade, right? So we're going to have kind of a little bit of 3rd grade, but not a ton in there. So where are my students coming in 4th grade? Where do I need them to be by the end of 4th grade so that my 5th grade teachers can pick up? It's really important that we understand that vertical alignment. So 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, right? So we're going to dissect the anchor standard, look at it across 4th through 6th grade and look at the differences between them. We're going to identify some strategies that we're going to be using to help us teach that anchor standard. Also have a variety of texts that also are going to match that anchor standard. And then finally, come up with maybe some fun activities that we can do with our kids to help scaffold that standard appropriately. So over the summer, I'm going to have, I think I'm going to do like 2 of these for free. The others are going to be paid, and they're going to be through Zoom. So we're going to have like a Zoom session where we sit down together and we just go through this entire through each of these standards. So I'll probably do maybe like 2 or 3 a week in the summer. And that's going to really help us just to be able to dissect the anchor standards and understand what they mean in upper elementary because they're very different. 4th and through 6th grade standards are very different from lower elementary, and we need to recognize that. Yes, they are still little babies, but that doesn't mean that they're not capable of higher level thinking. So I think we can find a really good balance between that. So that's kind of my game plan over the summer, is where we're going to go with that. We will have a couple of them that we'll just post here on YouTube, and then the others you're going to be able to find over at the Lettered Classroom. What do you guys think? You like it? You don't like it? Is that something that would be helpful for you? Are you thinking, I don't know, I feel like I got the anchor standards? Or is that something that you're like, thank you, the answer to my prayers? Because I remember as a 4th grade teacher, learning the standards was very challenging, and understanding what that looked like in student work was also incredibly challenging. So we're going to focus on those anchor standards and then identify all of those pieces.
So you got a couple questions. Do you see those?
No.
Are these interactive read aloud texts in addition to something like small group instruction? Do you see that one?
Yes. So here's what I would say. Yes, right? So if you think about bridging literacy, again, I'm using a sample mentor text that I read there, and we apply it, the skill, the strategy. What I consider my interactive read aloud is that 20 minutes that I carve out during a separate time from my ELA block to just read a text with my kids. And usually it's a chapter book, because I want them to see how we take what we've been learning and reading and then apply that to a longer text over a period of time. I hope that helps.
And then Stacy from Time to Teach starts in person tomorrow.
Ooh, you got this. I will say, guys,
She had a specific question.
Oh. Okay.
Should she be keeping bridging literacy on Schoology or change it to paper and pencil?
I do everything in Schoology. I don't use paper and pencil. I very rarely use paper and pencil, mainly because we were told not to use a ton of paper because of COVID. So I don't use a ton of paper, and plus it just makes life easier for me. Guys, being able to just post things up in my LMS is great. It is fantastic. It has saved me so much time in preparing for the next day. Okay.
Jennifer on Facebook is excited for the deep dives.
Ooh, good. I am so excited. I think it's going to be really beneficial. I truly do wish that I had something like this when I first started fourth grade. I struggled, y'all. Like that first year was really hard. But the more that I spent, like I have like a container, it's about this big, with all of the books that I've purchased to help me really understand and dissect these standards. And I'm going to provide you guys with a lot of different resources over the summer to help you gain a better understanding of them. But I think in the long run, we're also going to have conversations about how this ties to writing, because that's the big focus here for bridging literacy, is that we need it to tie to writing. Writing is our end goal. Writing is where we want our students to be able to apply, that's higher level thinking, apply the skills that we've been learning in reading. Identifying them is great, but at the end of the day, we want them to be able to then take those strategies, take the crafts that these authors have, and then pull that into their own writing so that they can grow as writers themselves. Oh, look at Josh Jones shouting out my book over there. Guys, did you know I read a book? I did. Trent went on ahead and put it in the chat, so you can go and check out that link. I'm very excited. It comes out on my dad's birthday, which is even more exciting. I'm just waiting. Like, I'm just like this little kid, like, that's sitting, and I'm like, ooh, when is it gonna come? Like, I should be getting my copy to share, like, physical copy pretty soon. I'm gonna cross my fingers, but I'm very, very excited. All right. Well, it is 8 o'clock, my friends. And so I'm going to try to be better about making sure that, oh, G-Rod, thank you so much for pre-ordering. I so appreciate it. It really, really does help. I never realized like how important pre-orders are until you like get together with a publishing company. Pre-orders are really, really important. And guys, there was one day I was like #1 in education. It was just for a day. But it was super exciting. I know. Thank you guys. Like I was #1 for a day because so many of you went out and pre-ordered that book, which was exciting. I snapped a picture, so I have a screenshot of it. I'm like, who knows how long this'll last? It didn't last long, but that's okay. I'm still very appreciative. So next chat. I'm gonna be honest. I procrastinated. We had Trent's birthday. What is today, obviously, but we did the birthday party on Friday. His dad's birthday was on the 11th, and so it's just like I was trying to plan a lot of different things for this, and then teachers are getting vaccinated at my district, so our schedule is going to be super wonky this week. But just follow me over on the Lettered Classroom. I'm going to get these resources up for you either today, tomorrow, hopefully, so that you guys can go and grab these resources, start using them in your classroom. Please make sure to share that with me. If you use the resources, snap a picture, send it to me, even if it's a private DM. I love to see that you're using some of the things that I'm putting out there. Sometimes, you know, you don't know if people are using it and if this is what you should continue doing. So any feedback that you guys can give me so that I can ensure that what I'm delivering is useful for you is really beneficial. So I will put this up over on Instagram. Follow me there, and then I will also put in Instagram what we're going to be talking about next week. I was thinking about chatting about how we can use books, either chapter books. We can use picture books, short stories, and it's more interactive way. So this is more hands-on paper things, some fun creative ideas that you can use these different texts inside of your classroom. I think that's where I'm going next, but we'll see. So go and follow me over on the Lettered Classroom for Instagram. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Just seeing you on here, just being able to chat with you. Like, it feels like I'm here with all of you, which is really, really great. I think I prefer this over just sitting down in front of a camera with no one talking to and looking at. I prefer this so much more. So doing live chats, it just energizes me. It gets me really excited about teaching, and I just appreciate every single one of you for hopping on, spending a little bit of your Sunday with me. So thank you, thank you, Thank you very much. Go and check out Jumpstart Learning in Your Kids over on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And yeah. Okay, guys. Be sure to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. I only have one like. Please, no thumbs down.
I think we're going to take it down and repost it and see if that does better.
Trent says we're going to take it down and we're going to repost it. So it's going to probably come up on your feed if you follow me. So guys, thank you so much for joining me in on this live. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you have a rest of your really lovely evening. I'm going to be off tomorrow because we just have an off day. So hopefully I'll be able to catch up on my sleep. It was rough this morning waking up. I felt old waking up this morning. I'm trying to cover up all my grays.
Josh is your hype man today.
Josh, you're my hype man.
Podcast.
Oh, Josh, you're my favorite person ever. Like, seriously, you're doing it. Thank you so much, Josh. I sincerely appreciate that. Yes, our podcast is great. Listen to it every Thursday. We've recorded 3 new episodes today, so I think they're going to be fun. There was one that's really, really good. I'm not going to say which one it is, but it's going to be coming pretty soon. So thank you guys so much. Again, be sure to give the video a thumbs up, and thank you for joining me. I hope to see you next week, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Bye.